In this video, you will be learning how to mix color and inking a palette to achieve the colors you will be using to create your print. Before printing, you will need to spend time mixing the color. You will first pick out your color swatches, then you will mix your colors to emulate the swatch. You can use color aid or paint chips from a hardware store. If these are not available to you, look for other source materials like magazines or photographs. You will first need to choose color. You can use color aid or hardware paint chips or even magazine cutouts. You will use scrap paper and you'll have your addition paper. You do not need a clean sheet. You can use even one that you've messed up. You'll need a pen, a palette knife, a brayer, your ink, and this is the water-based woodblock ink. I like to have tape, a rag to clean with, and Windex. You will see now I have made a series of paint chips. So here is a grayscale. These are all printed with the same ink that you are using. This is using ultramarine, and you can see all the different quantities that I have used. So there's 100% and 30%. Notice how when it has extender base in it, it starts to really become pale and shows the other colors below it. So here is a warm palette, so this is the yellow. And here's a red. And all I'm doing is using the same percentiles of 30% to 100% and showing you how to overlay the color. You will need to keep in mind value, tint, and of course hue. Here is black, where I've heavily diluted it with extender base. Now I'm going to make some colors for you. Remember, you're always going to want to have light color and mix dark into light. So here's my palette, and here is my addition paper. I like to use a piece of scrap paper with tape in order to keep the boundaries of the paper clean so I can take notes. I'm going to use a yellow first. So what I'm going to be using with the yellow is a copper. So the copper or any metallics I like to use to add a luminosity. You'll notice they're two different companies. It doesn't matter because they are compatible since they're both water-based ink. Now I'm going to mix the color together. You want to make sure that you slowly mix color in, and as I'm mixing, you'll notice that you want to make it homogeneous. The lighter the color, the more viscous, meaning the more oily it is. In our case, it would be watery. In order to stiffen your ink for water-based, I either use flour, and you can use any kind of flour, or I crush up Tums. And that basically is like magnesium carbonate. Now here I'm rolling the brayer across the surface of the plexi in multiple angles. Notice how I'm pushing hard down onto the paper in order to apply the ink swatch. That will be my base color. Here I am taking the note of how I mixed the color and what I used to mix the color. So the majority of it was pure yellow. Then the copper was a very small percentile. It just was, again, to make a luminosity. From there, I take up the piece of paper with the artist tape, and now I'm just going to have a little bit showing of the base color. One of the things you should also keep in mind is when the color dries down, it becomes matter and also a little bit lighter. Here I'm using another piece of tape so that I can make sure I only use a little bit of the yellow base. I always keep extra of the base because I like to add that into all the other subsequent layers of my ink, no matter what color it is. In this demo, I am going to be working fast, but you always want to keep your ink surface clean. So I'm using Windex, and never use the Windex on your brayer. It's not good for the rubber. You're going to want to use water, just water. Here I'm just rolling out extra, and I have the towel a little bit wet with water as well. And as soon as you are finished with a color, you should always wash all of your equipment, your brayer and your palette knife, so it doesn't become stained. Now I'm going to use a red, and I'm going to show you a couple of different reds and slowly add the red in. Again, when you're mixing, always go dark added into the light. Otherwise, you're going to have a massive quantity of a color you are not going to like. Again, mixing thoroughly. And you can see now it's becoming this kind of lush orange color. I'm going to roll out that color for you. If your ink tends to be a little stiffer, meaning a darker color will always be stiffer, you can add a teeny bit of water to it to dilute it. Just make sure to slowly add the water. Now, I'm going to be adding the color on the side of the paper to see if I even like it. No matter where you put your color, it's always going to shift. Make sure you consistently always mix in the same location. Daylight is the best to mix in because it has the truer quality of how you're going to see the work. Notice how as I'm mixing the red now, how it's becoming much deeper. Again, I'm pulling it up, making a ribbon across the surface of my plexi evenly, and I'm rolling the ink out. You want to make sure that you cover the entire brayer as well as you want to cover the surface of the plexi. Here I am rolling it across. And you can see how it's becoming deepened. I'm just going to add a little bit now to my yellow because I'm going to say, you know, I like that color. Here you are seeing it over top of the yellow, and now the two intermixed are becoming even warmer. Remember, warm and cool colors. You can also mix a cool color into a warm. There are really no different rules to color, except for that you cannot ever make a violet, you can never make a primary, you can never make white, and you can never basically alter a color that is not successful in terms of if you want to have a pure color, just go buy it. I always want you, though, to make your own palette. Do not always take things from the tub. It is an uninformed palette, and also, quite frankly, boring. So, the reason I have little quantities, again, is because I want to slowly make my ink so I'm not wasting ink. Ink is the same, water-soluble ink is the same as acrylic. They just have different bases used for different types of materials, meaning printmaking or painting. But you can think about mixing a color for painting is the same as mixing a color for printmaking. Again, here I am just rolling it out. So basically I'm making a scale of color at this point. So you can see how I built the color up. And now I'm going to make another swatch across. One of the things I recommend also is always making swatches so it covers, if you're going to do multiple colors, you cover as you go. So you do the first layer, then you do the second layer on top of the first layer, The third layer will go then on the first and second layer, and then you can really see how they interact. I personally enjoy a very clean looking color swatch. Now see how that red is really intermixing with the two other colors. Again, make notations. So here I'm going to make a black. Now usually people outline everything in black in printmaking. I'm always as an advocate of not doing that. Instead, if you want a darker outline, then make a different color. Add a warm to it, a cool to it. Don't do a pure black. I like to clean my palette in between every single color mixing so it doesn't become contaminated. Also, red will always stain your stain anything and everything. Ask yourself this: are you outlined in black? Then ask yourself, do you want to have everything outlined in black? You do not need to make outlines. Here I am again mixing the dark color into the lighter color, meaning the black into the red. And also notice I've used all of the colors together. So I'm still using the base inside of my color as I subsequently mix colors. You can use a yellow base tone into a blue, just very, very subtly, and it will kind of create a harmony on your palette. Again, I'm going to be building this color up, and notice how deep that red is. It's very fiery. But you know what? I decided I kind of want to make the color even deeper. So I just add and add color until I'm satisfied with it. The reason you're doing this is, again, you want to make sure you take time with this so that at the end you get a palette that you're enjoying the work with. Color will add a psychology to the work, meaning it will give a mood, an atmosphere. So you want to be very careful when choosing your color. Remember also, using white will always make everything pastel. Use white sparingly. I actually don't even use white often in my palettes unless I'm doing a white print, meaning white on white. I'm going to clean off the palette again. So when you are done mixing your quantities of ink, you can store all of the ink into airtight Tupperware. You can just use recycled Tupperware, meaning deli containers. Alright, so here I am again inking, and you can see that kind of orange kind of skin texture. That's what you want when you have a palette. It will be a full palette that way. Notice that black is no longer black, but a very warm black. Almost a purple black. Again, putting down my window mat, basically, out of tape. And just pressing across. And there you go. That's my entire palette. Now I can start to print my edition. And I'm done.